Good afternoon and welcome to Funny Like a Clown podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Dennis Wirth, coming from Beantown. And hey, we got Cheers. Remember the show Cheers? Beantown, it's all good. This is episode 18, March 31st, 2019. And we are here to discuss Stephen Wright. And to do that, I have my guest, local comedian Scott MacNeil. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you for being on. And I know on the national scene, Stephen Wright's known as the king of the one-liners, and on the local scene, we call you king of the one-liners. So
thank you.
You're the perfect guy. I do have to mention that Funny Like a Clown podcast is always brought to you by G Vegas Buffalo Sauce. For the spicy, sweet, savory taste at game time, there is only one G Vegas. And because you're in studio today, usually we have phone calls in, but Scott's in studio, we've actually brought in some G Vegas buffalo sauce. Look at that right there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that looking yummy?
It
That's
is.
your gift for being in studio. You can take that home with you today.
Do I have to report this to the IRS?
That's right. You have to tell everybody how good the G Vegas buffalo sauce is. So for our in-studio guests, they get the... And we got a big backyard barbecue contest coming up in Gardner, Massachusetts to promote G Vegas this summer. So buffalo sauce, man. All right, but enough about buffalo sauce. Let's talk about Stephen Wright, okay?
All right.
Now, I know you're a big fan of his, and you've had a few interactions with him. Tell us about your interactions with him.
Well, I think, too, I could be a little bit chronological. In the around 1983, 84, I was living in southern Florida, down near Naples, and I loved watching late-night TV, and that's when I first saw him.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, this guy's amazing. I love this style of humor and how clever he is, and highly intelligent jokes.
Different, very different. Everybody said what he was doing was different.
And I was shocked to learn that he was not only a New England comic, but he's originally from Burlington, Massachusetts.
Right.
And I grew up next door in Lexington, Massachusetts.
So you were drinking the same Boston water. You
Must
love
be
that
something.
dirty water.
I don't know if it's the radon in the water or what.
What it is, but
that's it.
They're kicking comics out of there, sure. But,
Well, we're both partially Scottish, too.
So, hey, good
Whatever that
Scotsman
may or
joke,
may
right?
not mean,
You know,
so.
right? But you've met him a few times. What was it like meeting him?
Well, I mean, it was kind of, I love a person. I love autographs. I love to interact with someone. I love a picture with, people. I love to meet my idols, and he's...
Picture says 1,000 words.
It is, and I met him the first time was up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at a benefit he was doing at the music hall.
Right.
And, some of the people were saying, he's got who he meets, and that's it. And I happened to encounter him, and
Now, how was he off stage? Was he cool? Did he treat you good, or was he kind of standoffish? Or
extremely humble right from the beginning. I asked him for a picture, and he went to pose, and I said, actually, the light's not good here. And I thought he'd say, well, you're out of luck, but he actually...
He moved with you, yeah?
No, he moved about 30 feet away. He found a spot with better light, and he said, how's this? And I was just,
cool. It's always cool when you don't forget where you come from. That's cool, but...
Very humble person, and a very nice guy.
Well, what makes you such a fan of his?
I just love the cleverness of the jokes. I mean, they're clean, which I like to be a very clean comic, and a lot of the punchlines I can't see coming. I like when I can't feel like there's a spin or a twist or something that's not...
A lot of jokes you can know what the punchline is once you do this long enough, and when you get someone they don't know, that's always a good thing.
I think, too, even he's so creative that when he comes out with something, I still can't predict it. It's not like I learned his formula and then...
Right. Because it wasn't like he wasn't the first guy doing one-liners, but he added the deadpan, slow delivery to it, where it really made it his own.
You're probably referring to Henny Youngman or someone like that.
Right. I mean, he was the original king of the one-liners beforehand. But so, what's your favorite memory of all his comedy? Everything he's done. Do you have a favorite joke or a favorite memory of an album or special or anything?
Well, actually, I like. He did a short movie thing. I've seen it on YouTube. It's The Appointments of Dennis Jennings.
Right. You're talking about that, yeah.
And there's certain moments in it that I just love, and I love when he's, just to pick an example, he took the cassette recorder, for his answering machine, he took the cassette out and put it in his Walkman. I know these are all dated things, but he's walking along the sidewalk.
Kids are out there, what's a cassette recorder, right?
Yes. Luckily they can Google these things to find out.
All right, so he's a Boston guy, as we mentioned. He's known for his lethargic voice, slow, deadpan delivery of short, ironic, philosophical jokes, mostly one-liners. Ranked 15th greatest comedian by Rolling Stone and 23 by Comedy Central. And I'm guessing you probably put him higher than that on your personal list. Where would?
I think number one.
Number one, really? He's right. All right, number one for. That's what makes you the perfect guy.
He gave me some advice. I told him about some frustration with comedy festivals.
Yeah.
You know, competing comedy contests, anyways. And he said before he was discovered, he was out in California, and out of 50 comics, he placed 29th.
Really? Yeah.
So he said you can't really go by a comedy.
Even Eddie Murphy, he ranked dead last in all the contests he did, and look, he went on to be one of the greatest legends of all time.
One of my favorite Stephen Wright ones. He called the airlines for a ticket, and the ticket woman said, "How many be flying?" And he said, "How the hell would I know?" He said, "It's your plane."
It's your job, not mine. Right? There you go. But as you mentioned, he won an Academy Award for Best Live Action Short Film for The Appointments of Dennis Jennings, which I haven't seen. Now, what's that about exactly? Give us a rough. I know it's a short film, but what is the premise?
He's got a girlfriend, and he's seeing a therapist who's played by was it Rowan Atkins, Mr. Bean, the guy from England.
Okay.
And it kind of gives it away a little bit, but it turns out that the therapist has started seeing his girlfriend on the side.
Oh, geez.
And
that's a big no-no in therapy.
And of course, Stephen has some of his great lines in it. When he first sits down with him, he said, the thing I want to do is find my real stepfather. He said, my natural parents won't tell me.
Right, okay.
Oh, yes.
But I know short films, they're like a commercial for a bigger movie that try to get you interested. About how long was the movie, would you say?
About 28 minutes.
Oh, so that's a long short film right there. Most are a lot shorter than that.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, most short films are like a commercial, to try and get you interested, and then if people are interested, they'll make a movie about it.
I will say, too, on YouTube, if you put in Stephen Wright Part 1, there's a 5-part thing that just shows him, like, at his peak.
Yeah.
And it's, I love that.
A lot of his jokes, sure. He won he's nominated 2 Primetime Emmy Awards for being the producer of Louie. Now, is that something you watched, or?
I missed that one.
You missed that one? Okay, because that show, I know that went on to be a big hit, and I had no idea he was the producer of it, but him and Louis C.K., they're both Boston guys, right? So, it kind of made sense where all us Beantown guys stick together, don't we?
Well, it's kind of like Christopher Lloyd. I met him at a Comic-Con.
Okay.
And one of the things I said was, congratulations on the success of the TV show Modern Family. And he said, thank you, but that's a different Christopher Lloyd.
Oh, same name, different guy.
He said, even my own family thinks that's me. So.
All right, so he was born in Cambridge, Mass. As you mentioned, grew up in Burlington. He said some of his influences in comedy were George Carlin and Woody Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, besides Stephen Wright, who were some of your other influences?
Emo Phillips.
Okay.
Henny Youngman.
So most of the one-liners, and that's...
I kind of like, a little bit of Mitch Hedberg, too. I kind of...
One-liners again, right?
Yeah, I kind of like some of George Carlin, but I like the cleverness part of it. I don't like the shock value type of jokes. So
right, okay, yeah. Now, this was an interesting one, because we're Boston guys, and we hear all the stories about all the old comics. In 1982, the executive producer of The Tonight Show...
Peter LaSalle.
Peter LaSalle, okay. He was at the Ding Ho Chinese food restaurant, and... If you know, we know about the Ding Ho. That was the original place where Boston comedy started for the big names. And he now, from what I hear, they started this room. It was the only place of comedy, and there was starting to be a little bit of rumble in the comedy world that they had something going on out here in Boston. So he said, "Okay, you set up a night. I'll come out there and I'll look at the comics." And this was like producer of the Tonight Show coming. This was the biggest of the biggest things coming, and he went into the Ding Ho. He was so impressed that he booked Stephen Wright on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and Stephen Wright went on the Tonight Show, and he killed it so bad. He was like one of the first comics ever. He was asked to appear again the same week,
yes.
Which I don't know if that ever happened, but now from what I heard about this, because I've done some research into the Ding Ho, that the night they had the contest, Stephen Wright, he went up there and performed. And after the show, he left. He didn't even stick around to find out who the winners were.
That's what I understand, yes.
So what were your stories you heard about the Ding Ho?
Well, Peter LaSalle, who was like the talent scout for Johnny Carson, was coming to Boston because I believe he had a son who was looking for a college. So he thought he'd try to tie it into a business trip, too, where he, it might have been Barry Crimmins, he contacted the Ding Ho and said, I want you to line up.
He was the one, Barry Crimmins, he ran the Ding Ho, just so people know.
Yes, to set up one comic after another.
Right.
And it was just a flood of comics. They were all excited. And like you said, I think Stephen was the only one who just
And they asked him, after the show, later on, why did you take off? And he said, that was the dream. It wasn't even real to me that I could win. Because as well as I do, we're on the local Boston comedy scene. We do a lot of contests, and if you do the contest, it has less to do with how funny you are and more to do with how many people you can bring to cheer for you, how many, butts you can fit. So it really has no, a contest has nothing to do with how funny you are. If you outside of comedy, you might think it does, but if you're in the comedy world, 99% of them are fixed, so I can see why he took off, because it wasn't even reality he'd win.
Well, I saw an interview with Stephen, and he said, I think it was like a week or two later, he got a call, and saying, this is Peter LaSalle from The Tonight Show. And he's like, okay, who is this? Because, being in comedy, people are going to prank you.
Right.
So he didn't believe it was real, and I'm like, no,
Sure, you're Peter LaSalle, right? But, I know, I heard from other, things I've watched about The Tonight Show was like, if you're a comedian, you're on The Tonight Show, you do your set, then you look over at Johnny, and he'll either wave at you to come over to the desk for an interview, or he won't wave, and that's how you know whether he liked your set or not. But I mean, Stephen didn't only get the wave, he got invited to be on the same week, which was unprecedented for a comic. That's how impressed Johnny was with him. And I know Johnny actually offered him a writing position on his staff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, now can you imagine? I mean, Johnny Carson, he was the king back then. You remember Johnny, you're a main comic. I mean, this was just the launch of the guy's career. But the Ding Ho Chinese food restaurant, like I said, other alumni were Lenny Clark, Barry Cummings, who ran it, we mentioned, Steve Sweeney, Bill Sonhage, Jimmy Tingle, Jay Leno, Bobcat Goldthwait. So, I mean...
Tony V.
Tony V. Can you imagine just all those legends just
Amazing.
In one place?
Mind-boggling.
And I interviewed Lenny on, I did a TV show, and he said, we had no idea. We did it for $20. We were just having a fun time. They had no idea they'd go on to be the legends. And who knows? Maybe, 30 years from now, we'll be the legends, Scott.
That's it.
We gotta look forward to it, right? But, all right, 1985, he came out with a comedy album, I Have a Pony, and it got nominated for a Grammy. What do you remember most about I Have a Pony?
Just the variety of jokes. I mean, that's one thing I like, is it's not just one topic. Someone might see the album and think, well, it's about a pony. Well, there's a mention of a pony in it, but it's a whole spectrum of all sorts of jokes.
Right.
And I think it was 22 years later, he came out with a second one, which was I Still Have a Pony.
I Still Have a Pony. That was one of his later albums, but you only get so much time on an album, and I mean, he had so much material, and he had to put the best of his best material that he thought on that album. And I know he nominated for a Grammy. I guess he did the job. That album launched him to HBO. Wanted to do a special that was taped at Wolfgang's in San Francisco, and it became one of HBO's most requested comedy specials ever. What do you remember about his HBO special? Anything? Or?
Well, I know I have it on DVD at home. I think I've seen it on YouTube. And it's outstanding. I mean, it shows him. I mean, of course, it's some years ago, but it starts in a desert, like a little tiny house out in the middle of nowhere, and he's living there. And he turns on the radio that's on a table, and it changes the weather outside. And it's a lot of clever but ridiculous things, which is what I love.
Well, which inspired you, because that's kind of the same thing you do in your routine, right?
Yes. Well, that's one of the things that surprised me. Is I thought Stephen Wright was the top of the people who do that style of comedy, but I find almost no one does that style of comedy. And I've had quite a few people say that my style of comedy, or my writing, is very similar to his. I've even had people come over to me after a show and like, are those Stephen Wright's jokes?
Right. It's tough. I mean, if you tell a routine, one routine can fill, 5 minutes. I mean, if you're telling one-liners, you got to do an awful lot of writing to fill 5 minutes.
But what a compliment for someone to say, they compare you to your idol, and they
they're his jokes, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So, he had a reoccurring role on Mad About You with the show of Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt. Do you remember that, Eddie? Or?
I used to see it sometimes, but now I used to see him on there. I think Paul Reiser's going to be up in New Hampshire.
He is at Headliners. I saw that. Yeah. Yes. And, but I mean, you watch a lot of the old shows, and you don't realize it back then. You watch them again now. He was on that. I didn't realize it, but they weren't stars back then. That's why you didn't realize it. But. He was he won an Oscar award for the appointments of Dennis Jennings in 1989, 2 Emmy nominations for Louis in 2014 and 2015. Now here's one that kind of surprised me, because we're Boston guys. I never even heard about this place, but in December 15th, 2008, he was the first inductee into the Boston Comedy Hall of Fame. Do you have any idea where the Boston Comedy Hall of Fame is?
It doesn't really exist.
It doesn't really? Okay, tell us the story.
Well, this is the interesting thing that you bring that up, is because I remember the exact date of that. That's December 15th, 2008.
Yeah.
And it took the award took place out in Foxborough, and it's more of a symbolic gesture than an actual physical building.
It was at Patriot Place, wasn't it? Because I
Yes.
thought I had read something about it, but
Exactly.
there is no actual Hall of Fame at Patriot
At least
Place?
not at that time, and I still believe that that's how it's meant to be a
so
bit
it's
ironic.
more of an online symbolic thing that they did. There's not actually a
Well, it was kind of a tribute
Hall
to
of
him,
Fame
but they
you
had
could visit.
all sorts of New England legends there, and Tony V was the MC.
Oh, okay.
And as soon as the show ended, there was like a flood of people leaving. And I'm like, there's Lenny Clark, there's Jimmy Tingle, Stephen Wright,
Right.
Mike
Hall
McDonald.
alumni, right?
And I'm like, what are these people leaving? This is, as good as the show to meet these people.
Wow.
So I walked around and I ended up talking for a while with Tony V.
So it was an actual live show they did to induct them in, right?
Right.
So, okay.
But this is how, this was the night I got my start in comedy that you happened to bring up.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I told some jokes to Tony V. And,
Yeah.
and I didn't have any agenda. And he said, those are really good jokes. And he said, I tell you what, give my friend at Giggles a call and tell him I said you're going on. So that's how, it's odd that you mentioned that night because
that's how you got your start. There you go. Okay, so, but I want the fans to know, I mean, you're a big fan and he really inspired you, but tell right now your two favorite Stephen Wright jokes, the one-liners.
Oh boy, I don't know if I have favorites, but one was paraphrasing about went to a factory that makes fire hydrants. You couldn't park anywhere near the place.
All right, that's a popular one. What's another one?
I don't get it with ballerinas. He said, why do they make them stand on their tiptoes? Why don't they just hire taller dancers?
Okay. Now, just to compare, tell us two of your personal jokes that are two of your favorite jokes that you have.
Well, I just recently got some devastating news. I've just been diagnosed with stage 4 hypochondria. Doctor says 6 months from now I'll think I'm dead.
Okay. That's one. Give us another one of your favorites.
Okay. I have a prescription to treat my obsessive compulsive disorder.
Okay.
It's a 1 milligram pill, and of course I take it 1,000 times a day.
That's a lot to take a pill, isn't it? But you can see why your jokes are being mistaken for some of Stephen Wright's, because I mean it's right up your alley where.
Well, and Stephen helped me with some insight too, because I was talking about testing out jokes. Right. And for most of my life, I've always had my sense of humor. And when I, talk with coworkers or acquaintances or whatever, they're like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
And Stephen's like, you can't really test them on your friends. You have to test them in a comedy club on a stage. It's a whole different mindset. Okay. And I'm like, well, I found that to be very true.
All right, we're filming here in Leominster, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston, and we're in a conference room at the Doubletree. Do you hear like noises in here? Because I'm starting to think this room's haunted. Is it just me or you?
Could be the voices in my head.
The voices in your head are coming
I'm
from
not
my
sure.
head too, but I'm here, boy.
Maybe you remind
we
me.
don't know what's going on in the conference room, but okay. But I mean, like you said, that's such a compliment to you. If they thought some of your jokes were Stephen Wright's, because I mean, I'm a Sam Kinison fan.
Right,
and
I was thinking that.
If somebody told me, hey, one of your jokes remind me of Sam Kinison, I'd be like, hey, give me a hug, I mean,
yes.
It's the ultimate compliment, and people think you're ripping him off. I was like, I ain't ripping him off. I was so influenced by the guy that, that's what I'm going to sound like.
I'd love to perform with him, but, I was talking earlier about Emo Phillips. There's a little video I put on YouTube of Emo inviting me on stage to tell an OC.
I remember he told one joke, yeah. That was
I was wearing this shirt at the time, in fact.
Right, so that's a good memory for you. All right. Stephen Wright's discography. I Have a Pony, a Stephen Wright special, The Appointments of Dennis Jennings, One Soldier, When the Leaves Blow Away, and I Still Have a Pony. So out of all those, which one would be your favorite?
I still stick with kind of Dennis Jennings, but I love his HBO special.
Okay.
It's almost like I like things joke by joke, but again, it's he can perform and jump from topic to topic, and I love that.
Right. Now, I mean, I know his HBO special, it was like one of the most requested specials of all time, which I thought George Carlin actually held the record for most HBO comedy specials. So, I mean, to put him in, probably he was honored to be put in with one of his heroes' name, because he said George is one of his influence, and
And he has an amazing memory.
You would have to remember that many one-liners. Oh my God, I don't know if I could
but
do
I mean even a long term, because he meets how many people every week, and I get to visit with him maybe every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And I went to follow up on something, like part 2, like 2 years later. And I was in the middle of starting to tell him the beginning part of it to remind him, and he interrupted me. He said, "You told me this 2 years ago."
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, "Wow, how?"
But I want you to know it's so bad, right? How did he remember that?
Well, I wanted to tell him the update, the part 2. He said, "No, just tell me the part 2. I already remember part 1." And I'm like, "Wow, amazing."
All right, we got a few questions from the fans here,
Sure.
and you want to get your reaction on those. But most of them, I said, I asked the fans, and most of them were right in their favorite one-liner of Steven, which I can say, if you want to listen to that, go buy his albums. I wanted more personal stories than I did just you reciting his work. But everybody's such a fan of his work, they want to tell their favorite joke of his.
Right.
But Seth Aronson wrote in, my favorite moment was when my cassette tape of I Have a Pony broke from being played too much. Now, for the younger kids who don't know cassette tapes, that was before CDs, okay, and they were this little reel. And have you ever had a cassette tape that wore out? Because I was a big Van Halen fan, and 5150 was my favorite album, and I actually played that Van Halen 5150 album so much, it started to slow down. I wore it out. I listened to it so much. But
well, for me, it's the Doors.
Okay, so the Doors, you ever wore out one of their cassette tapes?
Not only wore it out, but I had a 1979 Z28 Camaro, and it sucked up the tape. It didn't,
okay.
So I had to get up the tweezers and the whole bit.
The kids don't know the problems we had back then. Because CDs, they never wear out. They're built to last forever. And remember, you used to have to put the pen inside the little hole on the cassette tape and roll the back end of the thread. But all right, Steve Scarfo writes in, I was running Jester's Comedy Club, and he stopped by a few times to work out some new material, a highlight for me for sure. Now, have you ever been in a comedy club where a big star, came in, just a surprise thing, just to work out material? Because, we do open mics, which is, that's how we get ready for our bigger shows wherever we're playing at a comedy club. People don't realize that Stephen Wright, he does, big stadium shows, but he needs to get ready for those shows. And that's
he's
how
been
he
at
does
the Comedy Studio, I know that.
Yeah, he stops by comedy clubs. That's how he works out his new material to play.
I think I'm just blessed because I encounter these people here and there, like Justin McKinney, the Winner's Circle, Mike McDonald's up there.
Right, a bunch of Boston local legends. But I was at, you were there with me, actually, Gotham Comedy Club, and I was standing in the green room on my phone. I look up, I'm standing next to Jerry Seinfeld and Jim Gaffigan. They had done the early show, I did the late show, and we met in the green room, and I'm like, I'm standing next to Jerry Seinfeld. I don't believe it.
And he shook your hand.
He did. He was Jerry was very nice. Jim, he wasn't so nice. Well,
when Jim walked by me on the sidewalk.
You said he came out and you guys said so. So are you busy or something?
Rob Steen was with us, and he pointed out, he said, that's Jim Gaffigan. He's like 125 feet away. So I just instantly, I yelled out, I'd never met him before, but I yelled, hey, Jim, it's me, Scott.
Yeah.
And he turned around and he waved, and he's like, hey, sorry, I don't have time, but great to see you.
Yeah, I ain't got time for your fans. Thanks, man. But no, but Jerry was cool. I'll tell you, he was going to walk downstairs, and this young kid went up on the side of him to shake his hand, and most people would have kept walking like they didn't see him. Jerry hit the bottom of the stairs, turned around, walked right back up those stairs to shake that young kid's hand, and I said, man, that's classy. Jim Gaffigan, he was freaking out. He's, I'm getting noticed. I got out of here. I'm getting noticed. Boom.
Really?
Went dodging through the crowd and took off. I'm like, why are you doing comedy if you don't want to be noticed?
Hopefully we'll have that problem.
We're not on that level, so I guess we don't know. All right. Kennedy Richard writes in, seeing him on The Tonight Show and describing him to my friends the next day. Now, being a fan of Sam Kinnison's, I know, we got to ask our friends to come out and see us because that's how, we don't have a big following in comedy. And when Sam was at the Comedy Store, just everybody who went to see him, they were telling their friends, and he had such a huge following from just people explaining his act that, once your friend told you, you had to go see the guy. But, I mean...
Can I throw in a moment?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the last times I saw Steven, I had to ask him a question. I said, you tell a lot of, abstract type of jokes. Have you ever had people, or how many people have you been aware of that thought that anything that you were saying was real? And he was like, well, no one. That would be crazy.
Yeah.
I said, well, I have. So he wanted to hear the story. So I told him I was working up in North Andover, and my opening joke was basically about becoming a father for the first time, and that I was extra nervous because I hadn't told my wife yet. Was the punchline.
What do you think of it?
So after the show, all the people were leaving. This one lady, I think she was a couple years older than me, came over and she touched my arm, and I was standing at the bar, and she had a big smile. She said, we loved the show. You were great. All the other comics were great. And I wanted to take a moment and say congratulations.
Oh, right. And I said, you don't have any kids for the people to know. It's just a joke, right?
So she pointed. She said, about the baby. I said, there's no baby.
It's just a joke, lady.
And she said, what's your wife think about it, that you make up jokes? Right. And I said, I've never been married. And he's like, wait a minute. She said, you guys just make things up. And Steven was almost crying. He thought it was so funny.
Welcome to the real world.
Yes.
But that's what people. But some of the funniest jokes are the real life stuff if you tell us a story. But they don't get most of the stuff you make up. That's what a joke is.
And the audience probably wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, it's
usually.
not real. But now Ken Rogerson, who he's another legend of Boston comedy.
I've worked with him. He's a great guy.
Now he's actually a friend of Stephen Wright's. He wrote in him kidnapping my father in a really funny way from his hospital room. He made no demands for ransom and has yet to return him 2 years later. We're still laughing about it. So that's kind of cool that even when you get on the next level, you still play jokes like that with your friends, because, I mean, the camaraderie in comedy, I think that's part of the fun is making new friends and stuff like that.
It really is. There's a strong bond between comics, and we work with each other a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, that's your family. You got a comedy family and your regular family, and I'm glad you're part of my comedy family, Scott.
Absolutely.
All right, we end up every show with some trivia. You ready for
Here
some
we
Stephen
go.
Wright trivia?
God help me. Here we go.
And I got to set the premise that nobody ever does good on trivia, okay?
So I get my grade first and then get asked
Well,
the
most
questions.
people get 1 for 3. I asked 3 questions. Nobody's ever gone 3 for 3. Most people go 1 for 3. I think the record was 2 for 3.
I'm an overachiever, so I'll go for 4
Well,
out of
you
3.
know, I had you on my cooking show once. I do a television show other than the podcast, before the podcast, and I did funny food questions, and I think you were the only one who ever got the funny food question right.
Really? Wow.
You have set the bar. Are you ready?
Ready.
Here we go. What popular 1979 TV show did Stephen portray a security guard in?
A sitcom kind of?
It was a sitcom, yes. What popular 1979 TV show did Stephen portray a security guard in?
Well, I'll just take a guess. Taxi.
No, close. WKRP in Cincinnati. The episode was a fish story.
And I met Lonnie Anderson.
And we probably watched that episode. We all watched it, and we never even realized it was him because he wasn't popular back then.
So we'll have to pay attention, yeah.
So now we'll have to go back.
79, huh?
Yeah, way back when.
Before he was discovered. Yeah.
All right, number 2. He supplied the voice of the radio DJ in Quentin Tarantino's film. What film was it? He supplied the voice of the radio DJ in Quentin Tarantino's film. And I'd have never got this one if I didn't.
Mary Poppins. That's just
It was actually Reservoir Dogs.
Oh, I never saw that then.
Now, I saw Reservoir Dogs,
okay.
and I don't remember him as the DJ voice at all, but he was in there. All right. The last one is fill in the lines. Maybe you know this is one of his jokes, all right?
Okay.
So fill in the punchline to this joke. Curiosity killed the cat, but...
I would say the second mouse gets the cheese.
No, but for a while I was a suspect.
Oh, yeah.
Curiosity killed the cat, but for a while I was a subject.
Should have known it.
Should have known. Scott, I want to thank you for being a guest on Funny Like a Clown podcast. Tell a little bit about yourself. What do you got coming up in comedy, or where can the people check you out if they want to check you out?
Well, I'm excited. I got rebooked to open up for Gilbert Godfrey.
Really?
Yes.
I was at the first one you did. Great job. I was at the first time
That's
you opened
right.
for him.
And this one is on my birthday.
Oh, well, happy birthday. That's a good birthday.
So it'll be April 27th, 2019, up in Manchester, New Hampshire at the Doubletree.
Okay.
And then I also got booked for November 15th. I know that's a way off. I'm opening up at the Bull Run in Shirley, Mass. for Lenny Clark.
Really?
Yes.
Which you already did once for me, so again you're opening for Lenny. All right, so before we go, your parting words about Stephen Wright that you want people to know.
I think it's great when someone's not only very talented, I like when they're humble, and they're a very decent person.
Don't forget where you come from, right?
I think it's even more than that. I think he has his own values. He's lived whatever his background is. He's a very compassionate person. He's very sincere, and I even had it when sometimes when I get to visit him for 10 or 15 minutes. I forget to get an autograph or something, and I'll say it in a soft voice, "Oh, excuse me, Stephen," and he'll come rushing out of the room, and he's like, "Well, what?" I said, "I just didn't." "Oh, okay." And
he didn't forget about you.
No, I think he goes out of his way to pay attention, and when you're popular like that, you've got to say no here and there. But I think he's very as accommodating as anyone can be, and very humble, and I admire him.
Good guy, one of your heroes. All right, Funny Like a Clown podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Wirth, coming out of Beantown, and be sure to catch more episodes of Funny Like a Clown podcast. We're all over the internet. Until next time, keep laughing, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Woo.